Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Tony from McLaren. I'm really excited to be thought of speaking to him today. I'm sure you all are as well, tuned in. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items I'd like to go through, just so you know how to participate in today's event. At any time during the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to Tony. And to do so, just type your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the control panel there. And as time allows, I'll ask as many questions as I can during the Q&A and at the end. But if we don't manage to get through them all, or you come up with any questions afterwards, we've agreed that Tony is happy for us to send questions to him. So email us at careers@glasgow.ac.uk if you've got any questions that aren't answered, and we'll forward them to Tony. That's okay, Tony, is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Fantastic. So we're going to be recording this webinar, and we'll share the link after the event as well. So you'll be able to benefit from Tony's words of wisdom after this as well. So what is the Big Brave then? Just to introduce that, it's the closing event for each careers fair, and it offers you the opportunity to hear the career story of somebody who's ambitious and accomplished and who's really achieved success due to, well, bravery, because it's the Big Brave, passion and sheer determination to make an impact. And the Q&A is designed to answer pressing questions that are relevant to you right now and in the future. And we've got lots of Big Braves this semester. Have a look on our careers website to find out more about our other great speakers. So Tony then, Tony Salter is one of our own. He's a graduate of Glasgow University from 1998. And he's also now the Head of Aerodynamics at McLaren Racing and leads a department of 100 people in the aerodynamic department, obviously, for their Formula One cars. And he graduated, as I said, in 1998 with a first class in Aerospace Engineering. And I think it says here, and we'll check with Tony, that he had his ambition set in working within Formula One even then. So after graduating, he relocated to Bicester in Oxfordshire in 1998. So that was straight after uni, which is quite something, to join a graduate engineering placement scheme at Reynard Racing Cars, which at the time was a leading racing car constructor for the American IndyCar racing series. Following a year on the scheme, Tony took a development role in their newly formed computational fluid dynamics department, which was pioneering the use of CFD within motorsport aerodynamics. And then in 2001, he joined Williams' Formula One team as an aerodynamicist and spent 10 years in aerodynamic development before leaving for the role of principal aerodynamicist, moving with his family to Hinwil, Switzerland, to join Sauber Motorsport and their F1 team. And he's got a keen interest in cycling, outdoor and winter sports. So working and living in Switzerland for 4 years was a great way to find balance with a high-paced, octane-driven life, and also a more gentler, environmentally friendly and focused life then. And in 2014, McLaren recruited Tony in a reorganisation of their aerodynamic department, and he joined them as the role of principal aerodynamicist. And he was promoted to deputy head of aerodynamics in 2019, before taking over as head of aerodynamics in January 2020. So 2 months before, or 3 months before COVID hit. That must have been a big change, I'm sure. Yeah. So I've got a few questions up my sleeve, but we want this to be your opportunity to ask your own questions of Tony. So please be thinking of what you would like to learn from him and stick them in the chat, and I'll try and get through as many of these as I possibly can. So Tony, welcome. Thank you so much for giving us of your time. I know we were just chatting before, and I know you're a very, very busy man. So thank you very much for that. I just wondered if you could...
Yeah, right. Thanks for having me on. I'm very honoured to get the invite. It's just a shame I can't come up to Glasgow and be with everyone there, but that's just the shame of it at the moment.
Well, we'll maybe have to repeat it then when this is all over and get you back. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you give us a brief history of your career, if I can call it that, so far? What have been your career highs, if I can use that term, up to
now? From after Glasgow, or from going?
Oh, I don't know. Even before that, what were you thinking? Was it a bit of a high to get into Glasgow? I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, I grew up in East Lothian, Scotland, and I think from my hires, I got the entry qualifications for it's aerospace engineering that I wanted to do. So I applied to 5 universities there, and I got a number of offers there. So there was Glasgow was one, Imperial College, Loughborough, Cranfield, and Manchester. And I went and visited each one and spent a bit of time there. And I just very much connected, I think, with Glasgow. It was one of those probably rare days that I got off the underground and the sun was shining. I can remember walking up University Avenue, and it was stunning. And I just kind of felt that this was right. And I never quite got that same connection at any of the other places. So there was just something that felt right from that point. So I took that course and enjoyed 4 great years at Glasgow. Very fond memories, both of the university and the city. And then then leaving and graduating, I always wanted to get into motorsport and aerodynamics. It's not an easy thing to get into, but there was a small company called Reynard that were doing this IndyCar, and they had a graduate scheme, which they took on 5 or so people a year for a 1-year placement. Paid absolutely nothing. It's like £5,200 salary for the year, so £100 a week. And then if you wanted to take a room in their digs, they would take £50 a week off you for that. So it was basically an extension of university in a way. But it was a great entry into it, and I covered a whole number of bases around. So I'd move around different departments: production and composite design, mechanical design. And then after a year, they use it to kind of sift out, who they want to take on permanent. And I got offered a role in there. They were just setting up a computational fluid dynamics department. And I got offered a role as a junior CFD engineer there. And did that. I spent 3 years there with that small company, and again, still very, very fond memories of all of that, because it was just a great working environment, and my very first working environment, but very team orientated. The racing that we were doing was in the American series. It was a one make. There was 2 manufacturers. We were one. We were supplying 50-odd cars to the American market, and we would get together on a Sunday evening and watch the races as a team together, and have a couple of beers in the back of the factory. And it was just a very close environment, which was really inspiring. And but the main activity and research was all in Formula One, and that's kind of where I wanted to get to. And an opportunity came up at Williams that I applied for, and was fortunate to get a job there. And I joined those at a time where Formula One was in a big expansion. So I joined quite a small aerodynamics department. This is in 2001. And there was a huge amount of money getting pumped into Formula One at this time, from a combination of sponsorship and engine manufacturers. Williams were with BMW at the time. And it was at a kind of early birth of aerodynamics. So a lot of investment in new wind tunnels through that era, the era of 2000 to 2010. And we were at that point at Williams, we were competing for race wins at that time when I first joined. And I'll never forget the first race weekend there. We had the debrief. We finished first and second in the race, and I think it was Malaysia 2001. And Patrick Head gave a talk in front of the factory as a race debrief Monday morning, and just played it down. Said, "We're not here to win races. We're here to win championships. So let's get back to work." And it was great being part of Williams through that time, and meeting Frank Williams and Patrick Head, and memories will last for a long time through there. Very difficult era for them, but they're both great personalities. Frank will know everybody's name in the factory and would greet them by name on a daily basis, which was just outstanding for a figure like him. So for me, that's a great high to join such a team, and I grew up watching Nigel Mansell race on TV, so to be part of that was a huge dream come true. And then it's also very challenging because Williams were going through tough times from in the mid 2000s, not competing where they should be, and that's part of the sport. But to also be there as part of that was very, very challenging and very difficult. And then I spent quite a long time there and moved through, progressed through the department a bit ultimately to principal aerodynamicist that time. And then an opportunity came up at Sauber in Switzerland. And I think both from a work, after 10 years there, from a work point of view, but also I think in a life point of view, I was ready for something different and a change. And we took a fairly brave decision because I had a young family at the time. I had a boy, he was 3 years old, and my wife and I, we decided to move out to Switzerland. And my wife wasn't keen on it at all in the first time, but it turned out to be one of the best things that we ever did. Moved to just outside Zurich and worked for Sauber for 3.5 years. A great experience, different approach to Formula One, completely different work environment, completely different lifestyle environment. So hugely rewarding that for myself and family. And then the phone call rang one day, and we were quite literally we're skiing in near St. Moritz area on a holiday, and it was a friend of mine who had been hired by McLaren to reorganize their engineering department, and he wanted to know if I was interested in coming to join them. And at first I said no. I said, I can't. The snow's too good here. I can't leave this dreamland. And after a couple of weeks, kind of sank in. I was like, this is an opportunity, can't miss up on. So we moved back to the UK in 2014. I joined McLaren as they were preparing to start Formula One with Honda, which on paper had that could be the dream scenario, recreating the McLaren Honda era of the 80s. It hasn't panned out, had never panned out that way. It's a very challenging time with Honda and trying to restructure, and we're still kind of on our way back from that. So a few race wins along the way, but I've missing championships, which is something I really want to try and achieve whilst I'm still in Formula One.
Okay, and can I ask you, just how did your wife feel about moving back from Switzerland then, if she hadn't been keen to go and then loved it? How was she about moving back?
Yeah, but ambivalent as well, really. I think deep down we knew it was the right thing to do, but we knew that we were giving up quite a lot. It's a very, very special place to live, and we grew together quite a lot as a family, and we miss it to this day. We miss the mountains, and it changed our lifestyle. So we go back regularly to Switzerland as often as we can, really.
Well, that's great. Well, thankfully, we're getting a few questions in from students, so I'll just move on to them in a minute. But before I do, just could you sum up what inspires you, or what has inspired you, do you think, over the years? You mentioned, I'm not trying to make you tell me the answer that I want, but you did mention a few characters along the way. I don't know if they did or not, but what inspires you, or
well, from the beginning, when I grew up, so when I was an early teenager, Formula One was big in my household. My dad was a civil engineer, and he was a Formula One fan. He used to watch all the races. So I grew up watching races, and My mum's Portuguese, and she was a massive Ayrton Senna fan. So I just grew up in that era where Formula One was very engaging. There was something about aerodynamics that just intrigued me, from the Formula One aspect, but also other things. I remember at that time, I don't know if you may remember, but javelin was in athletics. Somebody redesigned a javelin, and it was setting world records by 10 meters, and I just was fascinated by this, and that kind of built the blocks. And I thought, this is kind of what I wanted to do. So Ayrton Senna was big racing idol of mine growing up, as was Nigel Mansell, and then coming through, Formula One and working. It's working for Williams and being part of Frank and working with Patrick Head and things like that are, very interesting characters, very inspiring what they've been through in their lives. And across through the journey, the people that we deal with, hugely clever, intellectual people, very, and a lot of that rubs off you. You find it very inspiring. Even to this day, we'll have meetings that are very engaging and very thought-provoking, and it's those type of people that I find very inspiring. Peter Petrumo, who talked with you last year, big brave, very inspirational aerodynamicist. That's someone that I take a lot of learning from and love to share thoughts with and discuss with.
That's great. Okay, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. I'll ask you. I'll merge the two together. It's a question from Lewis and Siddharth. So Lewis has said, while at university, did you participate in any internships or placements or study abroad opportunities? And if you did, do you think these were beneficial to your career?
Yeah, I personally didn't. I used the summers, and my dad was quite keen for me to go and use the summers to earn some money to help pay for the following year. So that's how I spent almost all my summers. But I would, if people get the opportunities to apply for internships and placements, I think it's a really good thing to do, and it will definitely help in your CV, and it'll help you in your application for your first role when you graduate.
Brilliant. And Siddharth says, hi, I'm looking to get into aerodynamics and into F1 too. I'd like to know if there are key things I could do, and if there are any things I could do to improve my chances of getting into F1 through aero engineering, like examples of what you did if possible. So what tips would you have for anybody who's trying to get into that?
So the first one really is to do well at university, get yourself a high grade. That's the first thing the top teams in particular will look for. And then the other thing is, you've got to try and distinguish yourself. So placements are good. Formula students, another good example of these things, but also, I see applications where people get involved in helping out with local race teams, which are around the country. They're around Scotland, and they can get involved in helping with these race teams. Sometimes it's on data acquisition, sometimes it's just helping out in the garage. But it's that demonstrating that person is a racer. Those things will really stand out, make you stand out compared to others.
Okay, so if you're really into racing in F1, you'll probably be doing things, hopefully, that would cultivate that interest and follow your heart, if you like, and that would help. So you can't, it's like everything really. You can't just I want to get into this. Well, if you genuinely do, you will probably be doing things that show that interest or follow that interest. I think that's what you're saying, which is great. There's a few questions here that are quite specific. Jack says, have you done much aero development on the 2022 car yet?
Yes.
I don't know.
We're banned at the moment. We're not allowed to.
Right.
So after COVID kicked off and all the teams went into shutdown to try and stop one another getting a competitive advantage in time. And it was a key point in developing the cars for which were intended for 21. So the teams got together and agreed to delay the introduction of these new rules to 22. And at the same time, delay all aerodynamic development until 1st of January of 21.
Okay.
So we're not allowed to do any active aerodynamic research in those cars at the moment. We can think about it, but we're not allowed to actually do any wind tunnel testing or CFD runs.
Okay. Oh, here's somebody saying, I'm an aeronautical engineering student. Does McLaren have any 6-month placement for master's students in 2021 to carry out their master's thesis? You know how here our students have to do a 6-month thesis or project. Does McLaren take students on for that kind of thing?
Yeah, we don't have a fixed scheme, but occasionally within our CFD department, we occasionally take on a placement term. So that could be worth dropping us a note for. And we've also have a graduate placement scheme, with the details of which have just been posted on McLaren Careers this week.
Brilliant. And
that's a 2-year scheme, and we're looking for entry in September 21. And that's a postgraduate scheme. So, and the idea with that is you'll move around different departments so that you can get a flavor of what, where you think your heart lies and your skills might lie. So there's McLaren Careers. If you Google search that, there's details there, and I've taken applications from that.
Right. I would imagine that'd be pretty competitive, but still worth doing.
Yeah, worth doing. I think it's a good. So we do we try and have an open day, and we'll have a lot of applications come in all together, and they'll do various tasks through the entire day here at McLaren. They'll meet some people for interviews, but we'll also give them some problem-solving tasks to do as a team. I think it's a really engaging day, and we sit back and watch how people mix with each other, how they solve problems, and work it out that way.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Here's a good question, I think. This is from an anonymous person, but I think it's getting at the skills that are required to do your job. So, hi Tori, in regards to F1 being such a complex and fast-paced project, can I ask, how do you keep on top of all your work throughout a competition year? Do you have any tips for staying organized?
Oh. Yeah, so the days can be very challenging, and there's a lot of things we have to process over time. So having a fixed regime or a rota through the day that you work to is probably a good thing. So putting time aside, say, right, I'm putting emails here. Meetings are at fixed times of the day. And also then we operate in the department, we'll have a day where we say, right, we're not having any meetings on a particular day of the week. No one's allowed to schedule a meeting, and that's our productive day. To try and make sure people get some time that they can be efficient in. So it's really trying to plan your time really in sections.
Mm-hmm. Do you use a diary of any kind? What do you use personally? Do you use Outlook? What do you use?
I just use Outlook. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got some crazy questions as well. Do you get a company car with McLaren, and what do you drive yourself? So let me ask you those two. That's interesting.
Unfortunately, no, I haven't got a company car, which would be nice to have. There's lots of them outside, but I haven't got one. And I've got a Volkswagen camper van.
Oh, brilliant.
California is what I drive, and today I'm on the push bike.
That's fantastic. Well, good. That's interesting. So you're still environmentally friendly then, really?
Yeah, I'm 10 minutes away on the push bike, so I'll use that.
Absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? I think even racing drivers have to be incredibly fit as well, don't they? They don't just sit in a car. I mean, it's a really demanding thing as well, and it's good for anybody to be doing that kind of thing. I've got a tough question for you, which I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but it says it's let me try and find this here. Yeah, which has been your favourite team to work for and why?
That's an interesting question. Difficult one to answer because they're all very different. And I almost can't answer it because they come with such highs and lows. So, like I say, being part of Williams was because of their history and who they are, and meeting the people involved there is hugely inspiring. And we had some race wins there, which were great. And then at the time in Sauber, a team with a very small budget, we punched above our weight, and we'd have the ambitions were lower. But then when we had a couple podiums, they felt like race wins to a smaller team like this. Mm. And then to be part of McLaren and the history here is hugely, I'm very proud of that. Just to out here, you've got, a whole series of cars driven by Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna, massive amount of history. But with that comes a lot of weight and expectation, and they're here to win, and that's not easy. So really difficult one to answer, to be honest, because they're all so different, and I take quite a lot out of each experience.
No, that's a good answer. That's a good diplomatic answer as well. So thanks very much for that. There was something you said there. I'd just like to pick up on that. You mentioned the sort of weight of responsibility for when you're working with a team to try and get results. And I suppose, how responsible do you feel for McLaren and its success? How does that work for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're all a team here. There's 800 people at McLaren on the Formula One side. Mm-hmm. Aerodynamics is a massive player in the performance of the car. So when things are not going well, then yes, we feel a sense of responsibility for that, but also you don't have everything in your control. So it's we need to be pragmatic about it, and I think fundamentally, as long as we feel that we've done our due diligence and we've done our work, it's not a smooth ride. It's not a simple science. The development of these cars aerodynamically is hugely challenging. It's not straightforward, and there can be bumpy roads at times, and I think we understand that, and it's the teams that do best are that the whole teams understand that, and they keep the support within the teams. And where it can become fragmented is when you have finger pointing within teams, and then it all falls apart, and then they start making changes, and then there's lack of continuity, and then it all brings it snowballs from there, really. So yeah, not straightforward, but yeah, you kind of have to thrive under pressure rather than let it overwhelm you.
I mean, I think we've got lots of good questions, and I do want to get through as many student questions as I can, but I think there's just a train of thought here that I think is really interesting, because a lot of companies now, and graduate recruitment generally, they talk about resilience as being very, very important, and I can't imagine a more tougher environment than you and needing to be resilient sometimes. So can you maybe tell us about how you've maybe overcome any setbacks or problems? Is there any specific thing that you could tell us, and how you do it yourself? What inner strength how do you cope with those kind of things, setbacks?
Yeah, so you have to put, I mean, the first and foremost, and you put these things into perspective. It's a sport. It's hugely competitive, and for us, it's part of our lives and it's part of our jobs. But it's also there are bigger things in the world that can go on. There are bigger life-changing things that happen to people. So first of all, you need to put it in perspective. When we come across challenging moments, then it's about how you bring together as a team. One person isn't going to solve problems or find solutions, to it. So it's about bringing everyone together as a team, and taking that responsibility of people. As long as we work together, we've got some very great, talented people that if you organize them the right way and put them in the right environment, we can solve problems and work our way through things. I think, and it's about trying to remain logical and put emotion and aside.
Yeah, that's really great. Thanks very much. That's brilliant. Okay, I've got some other more light-hearted questions here for you. So, what is, from your perspective, the coolest feature or contribution that you've personally developed for the current Formula One car?
For the current Formula One car,
that's the question, but we can expand it. Don't feel limited by that.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not directly in terms of drawing parts at the moment that go directly onto the car. Most of that comes through the teams, through the people working in the teams below me. From a career point of view, then actually one of my things I always remember was an update that I was very heavily driving when I was at Williams, and when we put it on the car, his last race of the year, in 2003, I think, I can't remember, 2004, and we won the race with it. And so that's something that kind of will stay with me for time.
Yeah.
These days, there's a lot of collaboration across the cars, that trains of thought that go in, a lot of people working together on the ideas behind the updates and the theory behind the car. So there's one side where you can be personal with, I've designed that component, but it's rare that it's only one person's thinking that has got into that component these days. It's much more collaborative.
Right. That leads me on to another question. I suppose just that whole idea of how things change and becoming more collaborative and more team focused, which I think is quite interesting. I think that reflects wider society as well, and changing the way people work. Teams are, deemed to be stronger. So, somebody's asked here, where is it? Try and find this. Sorry. How has the relationship between the aerodynamics and the development in the cars changed from when you started to now? So the relationship between the aerodynamicists and the rest of the teams, how has that developed and changed?
They're much more integrated now, compared to when I first started. So to compete at the top end, the whole layout of the car needs to be considered as one. So the aerodynamic philosophy needs to drive the structural design of the car, and a lot of these things come at weight trades or engineering trades that need to be properly laid out, and the right compromises considered. So yeah, it's much more integrated. It used to be, when I joined at Williams, aerodynamics was in a completely separate building. The wind tunnel was based outside, and we worked in a separate office to the full scale car. And now we're completely embedded with one another. So you can just walk and down to someone's desk and who's designing a real sale car, and you can have a much closer relationship.
So the relationships have changed then, and the way you deal with, the people that you deal with kind of has changed as well. And again, somebody who's anonymous has asked you a question along those lines. I'll read it out to you. I just wanted to ask if there are any skills or qualifications that would be particularly useful to learn for working in industry that we may not be taught at university. For example, maybe software skills that's not part of your course, or managing people. What would help distinguish yourselves other than just tech experience, do you think? Well, so I suppose to sum it up, it's like, well, what are the softer skills that you would also look for now? Have they changed, and how would you be looking for them?
Yeah, so some people arrive and look at with skills in MATLAB or in programming skills, C++, etc. So those can be quite beneficial depending on where you might end up in your roles. But a lot of the work we do is we develop our own tools rather than buy in-house, off-the-shelf software. We develop things in-house. So adding some of those skills to your background could be very, very useful.
Okay. And what about the softer skills? Like, would you look for evidence of interpersonal skills and team working and those kind of things as well?
Yeah. Sorry. So definitely what we do now, I personally try to gauge that in interviews. It's very important that people can communicate as part of a team. Like I say, the development of these cars is not individual based. The most successful projects that we do in aerodynamics tend to be very collaborative, and people discussing and bouncing ideas off each other. So that's key. Communication skills, I would say, is really important.
Okay. We're getting some quite deep questions here, Tony. So here's one. Now, it's how did you cope with the pressure from the entire F1 community, and particularly Fernando Alonso, when the McLaren-Honda relationship was failing? I can ask this because I have no idea what this is about, because I am not an F1 buff, but I'm hoping that you understand this question.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Obviously, the Honda, when they came into Formula One, huge budget, huge amount of resource into behind it, but they were just a little bit behind where they needed to be. But that's completely separate to the aerodynamics, and it's part. There's so many aspects to the teams these days. It's not you can't compete in Formula One with just one part of the ingredient right. You need to be on top of absolutely everything. So it's aerodynamics, the design of your car, stiffness, weight, getting the most out of your tires. You need your best race strategists to make sure they get the best out of the weekend. You need your best mechanics to make sure they get their pit stops dialed in. And you can't. So if you're down in one, particularly an aspect, particularly if it's a high performance aspect like the powertrain or the aerodynamic side, then you're not going to be able to compete. But often you find teams who have very good power units, good chassis, but they still can't maximize their race weekends because they're making the right decisions on the pit wall or let down by pit stops, etc.
Okay. So again, moving on from that, Daniel's asked, as the drivers drive the car that you design, how closely do you work with the drivers? And how large an understanding do you have to have of how they drive the car?
Yeah, so we work with the drivers very closely. So the race engineers, we have a race engineer dedicated to a driver, and he's there to get the best out of the driver and set up the car that they have to maximize its potential on a given race weekend. At the same time, we've got to try and understand what's holding the driver back and what's his limitations in the car. What could we do to get him faster within the car? And then we try and relate that to the aerodynamic side. And so if he's describing a limitation, we try to see if we can see that in the aerodynamic data from track. And then we try to understand if we do see something at track, do we see that in a wind tunnel environment? Do we see it in our CFD environment? If so, then what's going wrong there? What are the problems, and how can we fix that? So yeah, it's a huge important parameter in it. But the key is to trying to link it with all the other bits of data. So he's the sensor in the car, but also can we look at what he's describing, and can we see it in pressure taps on the car or in forces on the car, and then can we relate that to our development tools?
Excellent. Lauren's asked another insightful question. As head of aerodynamics, how important is delegating tasks to other team members for you? And are there any jobs that you prefer to be hands-on with? Maybe you don't have the chance to do that now, but I don't know how you
yeah, really good question. Very good question, because there's particularly in Formula One. I mean, I'm sure it's similar in other industries, but sometimes you end up getting promoted because of your technical ability, and then you end up in a position where you're actually not doing the job that you were good at, because you end up in a management role where you might not have been very good at management. So it's quite important to kind of understand where your strengths are. And so for me, I try and build a team around me that we all work together as a team. So I, rather than being a manager of the department, I try and keep my position where I can help lead the department and represent the department. So that means putting people around me to do very specific roles that we all support each other. So if you take the head of aerodynamics and all that encompasses, I can break it into chunks, delegate that down. So I have a great support on operational side, I have great support on a people management side, and it allows me to keep quite in tune with the technical aspects and work with the technical department, because fundamentally we're here to make a faster racing car. So it's important that our department's driven to do that. So it needs to be first and foremost a technical role.
Well, that's really interesting. How has it changed for you then, from when you started to now, in that whole idea of being hands-on, and then how have you felt about doing that, and as you've gone through and risen up, if you like, through the ranks, as it were? Is there anything that you miss, or anything or has it just all been great new challenges?
Yeah, it's changed because the department's a lot bigger now. I mean, the things that I miss, so in my early career where I'd be directly designing components, and then you see exactly what you designed on the Formula One car. I have a great memory once of being in the wind tunnel till like 2 o'clock in the morning in a response to some issue we'd seen at track, and we'd made some modification to a part. This is on a Friday night, got to bed late, get up on the Saturday morning, turn the TV on, and there's my modification that I was on track that I'd just been working on in the early hours of the morning. And it's that directness, which is hugely rewarding. But it's harder in this day and age. The aerodynamicists still have that. There's a person who's designed a rear wing, and they can say pretty much that's their own rear wing. I don't have the time just to be able to spend solely on just designing components. My role is just too big to focus on my time on individual items.
Yeah, and can I ask you how happy are you with that, with the change then? How, is it?
It's a bit kind of bittersweet, because it's there's like I say, great reward for being hugely directly involved, but then there's also I take great satisfaction from seeing a team that come together and deliver on projects. and knowing that, you know, they've been supported through that. You know, we've given them the right tools to be able to do that. So it just shifts really. Yeah, you can't have you can't have it all really. You gotta.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people who are like you and you're successful and you move up, it's like different source, different things give you different buzz, but it's all there. It's still a real great feeling of satisfaction. It must be amazing to see a whole team as big as the one you've got gelling well and producing results that everybody benefits from. That must be amazing. In all of these, it's funny when you do this kind of thing with a load of engineers, you do get some, if I could be really, really cheeky and call it a geeky question, it's not really, but I'll read it anyway. Gordon has said, "Hi, Tony, I've been interested in a career in Formula One and specifically aerodynamics for a while. What do you recommend for someone such as myself looking to pursue a career in the same discipline as you?" I think we've kind of covered that. But then he goes on to some really specific questions, and I don't know if you can answer these. Did you work on any of the infamous outlawed aero devices on Formula One cars, such as F-ducts or the double diffuser? And also, having worked through three eras of Formula One, which was your favourite engine type? My word, a V10, a V8, or a V6 turbo?
All right. Yeah. Have worked on some of those concepts at the time. Double diffuser was one. I was at Williams at the time. There was a guy in my team who came up with an approach to the same loophole that was exposed by Braun at the time. We had tackled it in a different way, but with a very similar outcome. I can't take credit but I was involved in helping develop the project, but not in finding the loophole. V10s, has to be V10s.
Why is that for somebody who doesn't know a thing about engines? Why would you say that?
Just the noise.
All right, okay.
Phenomenal.
Okay. Nikitas has asked, what's your opinion on the drastic upcoming changes coming to F1 2021 regarding the research/engineering aspect of the sport and the impact it might have on young engineers interested in the sport professionally?
So on the technical side of the regulation change, it's being driven by Formula One to make the cars. There's an aesthetic aspect to it. I think they probably don't admit that openly, but when you see the cars, you'll see they're very aesthetically driven, and the rules are written to try and keep that there. And then they've tried to control the wake behind the cars to make them easier to overtake. These current cars at the moment, I mean, Formula One cars have never been easy, but at this point in time, they generate huge amount of downforce, more so now than they have done in all my time, 20 years in Formula One. And they generate huge wakes behind them. So within certainly getting less than 5 seconds, the car behind is noticing the wake from the car ahead. And so the rules are designed to try and minimize some of the wake behind the car. And they're trying to write the rules that will maintain that over time. We need to see if that pays its testament. So, but it's it's basically starting from a blank sheet of paper again. I think it's the biggest change in technical rules, certainly in the 20 years that I've been involved in Formula One. And it is completely start again. Right. So very, very challenging and very prescriptive rules as well. So yeah, but open-minded about it really. Could be quite challenging for teams to adapt and might mix the pecking order a bit.
Okay. We're almost coming up to the end. I've just got a couple of questions I think to ask you now. Somebody's asked, I think I know the answer to this question myself. Is there a role in F1 for people with computing science degrees?
Yeah, absolutely. We, it's, we're not just to develop Formula One cars. you need to be, we rely on tools effectively, simulation tools and aerodynamics, whether it's the wind tunnel or CFD, but we also generate huge amounts of data, absolutely massive amounts of data. So software development is key for us. Analysis tools are embedded within that, modeling tools, mathematical modeling, how do we get the most of our data, artificial intelligence is, and as a method is potentially something that we're trying to research. And it's how do you get the most out of the data that you're generating, because the rules are written now where the amount of aerodynamic research is controlled from the rules. So the number of wind tunnel runs we can do in a week is limited, and the number of CFD geometries that we can run is limited. So then it becomes how do you get the most from your data, and can you, and whether it's optimizing solutions or is there, so there's a huge amount in computing science, I think. More than ever.
Yep, they're in great demand from virtually every sector now, software and computing. Right, I'm going to ask you just two more questions really. I like this one from Cameron. It's a bit more philosophical again, and given that you're into mountain biking, I don't know what the answer to this will be. What are your opinions on the direction that fossil fuel / hybrid motorsport is heading in this day and age? So are we heading away from fossil fuels, and what do you think in the future?
Yeah, no, it's a good and relevant question. So I liken it to when I grew up in Formula One. Formula One was pioneering technologies, ABS brakes, traction control. They're all standard, and you wouldn't get in a car these days without them. They wouldn't be here without Formula One, or they'd be here a lot later in time. Power steering is another one. Semi-automatic gearboxes. These are things that came from Formula One and filtered through to the road cars, and the same with hybrid engines these days that are in common in road cars. It now feels personally to me that Formula One have missed a bit of a trick with focusing on these kind of aerodynamic rules, rather than getting on board with the next generation of engines and power units for Formula One, which the car manufacturers are already pulling out research of fossil fuel engines now and going full electric, and it feels like Formula One's on the back foot with that. They should have been more advanced and said we'll be the first electric formula, and that would have, and then I think Honda are pulling out as a result of that. So yeah, personally, I'm a bit sad that it's not pioneering the electronic drivetrain market, whereas that is coming from other manufacturers and startup outfits.
Well, that might be something that we see in the future, a big move towards that. Who knows? I was going to ask you a final question, which is, what does the future hold for you? But somebody's asked already, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? So what do you think the future holds for you?
Yeah, interesting. I've never even thought that far ahead, to be honest, ever. I've never, it might sound odd that, 10 years ago, if someone had said, oh, you'll be, head of aerodynamics at McLaren, I would have just laughed. So yeah, I'm not sure actually. I might have run my time with Formula One in 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's quite demanding. And I think I'd be quite interested in looking at some different engineering challenges that involve aerodynamics. And, I was recently have a look at the Ineos and their America's Cup yacht, and the technology and the research that's going into that is phenomenal. But there's also lots of other really exciting engineering projects that are coming through the world at the moment. So yeah, I'm not too sure, but I kind of want to hang around for some race wins and hopefully a world championship before I.
But even just listen, that's brilliant. But even just what you've said, it just shows that even though you might not be thinking about changing just now, you can already appreciate the sheer transferability of what you do. And I think a lot of people maybe don't get that. There's a lot of things you can apply to use your skills to do and change direction and get new exciting opportunities as we go through our lives, aren't there? So
Yeah,
that's a great thing to end on, that really your life can be a lot of what you want it to be, which may be a bit cheesy, but it's true.
Yeah, it's true. There's lots of opportunities at the moment. It's especially engineering and technology, computing science. It's a very exciting sector to be in.
Well, Tony, I think unfortunately we're out of time, and we've got with 74 questions. I think that's a bit of a record. We certainly didn't get through anything like that. You might get a rather large email from us with all of them afterwards, but we'll see about that. But can I just thank you? I'm sure there's already some comments, people saying that they've really enjoyed it. People have had to go to classes, but they've really enjoyed it, found it really inspiring. So I'd like to thank you just on behalf of everybody that's here. I know we can't have a huge round of applause because we can't hear it, but if we were in the lecture theatre, you'd be getting that, I can assure you. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time. And it's really great to have one of our graduates back, and what a fantastic story you've got and fantastic things you've been involved in. So thank you very much. And also the life lessons that you've given our students have been great. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who's logged on. Enjoy your time at Glasgow. Very fond memories. Like I said, it's a great place to be, great place to study.
Okay, thanks very much, folks, and come back to the next big brave. Find more on our website. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.